everyone. Thanks for taking the time to read this. I'd love to know where you're all from. Drop your city in the comments if you feel comfortable. Now, let me tell you about how my entire world collapsed and rebuilt itself in the span of 3 months. My name is Victoria, I'm 31 years old, and up until recently, I thought I had everything figured out. I was living in Portland, Oregon, running a successful digital marketing agency with my college roommate turned business partner, Nicole. We'd started the company 5 years ago in my tiny studio apartment with nothing but 2 laptops, a dream, and an unhealthy caffeine addiction. Through sheer determination and countless sleepless nights, we'd grown it into a 7-figure business with 15 employees and clients across the country. Nicole wasn't just my business partner. She was my best friend, my confidant, the person I'd called at 2 a.m. when my father had his heart attack 3 years ago. We'd weathered every storm together, the lean early years when we ate ramen for dinner most nights, the first major client who tried to stiff us on payment, the pandemic that nearly destroyed us. I remember one particularly brutal week in our second year when we'd lost 3 clients in 5 days. We sat on the floor of our cramped office, surrounded by rejection emails, and Nicole looked at me with tears streaming down her face and said, "We're not quitting. We didn't come this far to give up now." That moment bonded us forever, or so I thought. We were a team, an unbreakable unit. We knew everything about each other. I knew she was allergic to shellfish, that she still slept with a nightlight because of a childhood fear of the dark, that her first real heartbreak had been a guy named Tommy in sophomore year who cheated on her with her lab partner. She knew I had panic attacks before big presentations, that I called my mom every Sunday without fail, that I'd turned down a 6-figure job offer from a major agency because I believed in what we were building together. We'd made a pact on the day we officially registered our business. No secrets, no lies, always honesty. We even had it printed on a little plaque in our office. Looking at that plaque now, in storage with all the other remnants of that life, makes me feel physically ill. Then there was Marcus. God, Marcus. We'd been dating for 2 years, and I was convinced he was the one. We'd met at a tech industry mixer that I'd attended reluctantly, dragged there by Nicole, who insisted I needed to network more and stress less. He was standing by the bar, tall and handsome in a way that seemed almost unfair, with these deep brown eyes that made me feel like I was the only person in the world when he looked at me. He'd approached me with a terrible pickup line, something about how I must be a great marketer because I'd successfully marketed myself into his thoughts. It was cheesy and ridiculous, and I'd laughed so hard I'd snorted. That laugh, he told me later, was when he knew he wanted to know me better. He was a software engineer at a tech startup, brilliant and ambitious, with a mind that could solve complex coding problems in his sleep. But he was also kind, thoughtful in ways that mattered. He remembered that I took my coffee with oat milk and 2 sugars. He'd leave little notes on my car windshield when he knew I had a tough day ahead. Once, when I'd been working 16-hour days to land a major client, he'd shown up at my office at midnight with Thai food and a heating pad for my chronically tense shoulders. "You're going to burn yourself out," he'd said, his voice full of concern. "Let me take care of you." He was supportive of my work, never complained when I had to cancel date nights for client emergencies, and got along perfectly with Nicole. The 3 of us would have dinner together at least once a week, usually at this little Italian place in the Pearl District that made the best carbonara any of us had ever tasted. He'd joke that he had 2 girlfriends, and we'd all laugh. Nicole would roll her eyes and throw a breadstick at him, and everything felt perfect. The memory of those laughs, of that easy comfort between the 3 of us, now makes me nauseous. I wonder how many of those dinners they spent secretly planning my downfall. I wonder if they laughed about me when I wasn't there. Our company, Lighthouse Digital, specialized in social media marketing for small to medium-sized businesses. We'd carved out a niche helping family-owned companies transition into the digital age, and we were damn good at it. Nicole handled the creative side, content creation, graphics, strategy. She had this incredible ability to understand what made people click, what made them engage. She could look at a struggling hardware store's social media and immediately know how to tell their story in a way that resonated. I managed operations, finance, and client relations. I was the one who made sure invoices went out on time, who smoothed over problems when they arose, who kept our trains running on schedule. It was a perfect division of labor. We trusted each other completely. Nicole had full access to our business accounts, just as I did. We could both sign checks, approve expenses, make financial decisions. That trust, as it turns out, was my biggest mistake. About 8 months ago, things started feeling off. Nothing dramatic, nothing I could point to and say definitively, that's wrong. Just small inconsistencies that I couldn't quite put my finger on. Our profit margins were shrinking despite taking on more clients. We'd landed some of our biggest accounts ever. A regional restaurant chain, a boutique hotel group, a statewide nonprofit. We were billing more hours, charging premium rates, and yet somehow our bank account wasn't reflecting that success. When I'd review our books, the numbers just didn't add up the way they should. We were billing more but somehow had less cash flow. The math wasn't mathing, as the kids say. I'd mention it to Nicole in our weekly finance meetings, which we held every Monday morning at 9. I'd pull up the spreadsheets, highlight the discrepancies, and ask if she saw what I was seeing. She'd always have an explanation. Unexpected software costs, a client who was late on payment, higher than anticipated contractor fees. "You know how it is in this business, Vic," she'd say with that warm, reassuring smile. "Feast or famine, we're in a growth phase. It's normal for expenses to spike." It all sounded reasonable. She was my partner, my best friend. I had no reason to doubt her. More importantly, I didn't want to doubt her. Doubt meant suspicion, and suspicion felt like betrayal in itself. Marcus, around the same time, suddenly became very interested in my work. For the first year and a half of our relationship, he'd been supportive but not particularly curious about the day-to-day operations of Lighthouse Digital. He understood I ran a marketing company. He was proud of my success, but the details didn't really interest him. He was a developer. His brain worked in code and algorithms. But suddenly he was full of questions. How do you track expenses? What software do you use for invoicing? Who has access to the business accounts? How do you verify that vendors are legitimate? What's your approval process for large purchases? At the time, I thought he was just being supportive, maybe considering starting his own company someday. He'd mentioned being frustrated at his startup, feeling like he'd hit a ceiling. I thought maybe he was picking my brain about entrepreneurship. I was flattered by his interest, honestly. I answered all his questions enthusiastically, grateful to have a partner who cared about my work. I even walked him through our accounting software one evening, showing him how we categorized expenses, how we tracked income, how we reconciled our accounts. I remember he'd asked very specific questions about vendor payments, about who could approve them, about whether we required receipts or invoices for every transaction. "You're really thorough with this stuff," he'd said, and I'd glowed with pride. "It's important," I told him. "Nicole and I built this from nothing. We have to be careful with every dollar." He'd nodded, kissed my forehead, and told me I was brilliant. I felt so lucky to have someone who understood the weight of running a business, who appreciated the attention to detail it required. What a fool I was. He wasn't interested in learning from me. He was learning how to rob me. Nicole started acting differently too. We'd always been fairly financially conservative with our personal lives, even as the business grew. We paid ourselves modest but comfortable salaries, enough to live well but not extravagantly. We'd agreed early on that we'd reinvest most of our profits back into the company for the first 5 years, building a strong foundation before we started taking bigger distributions. But suddenly, Nicole's lifestyle changed dramatically. It started with the car. She showed up to work one Monday morning in a brand new BMW 5 Series, sleek and silver and definitely not in our agreed upon budget. I'd been pulling into the parking lot right behind her and had to do a double take. When we walked into the office together, I couldn't help but comment. "Nice ride," I'd said, trying to keep my tone light and not judgmental. "When did you get that?" She'd waved it off with a laugh. "Oh, I decided to treat myself. It's actually a lease, and I got an amazing deal through some promotion they were running, basically paying the same as I was for my old Honda." The math on that didn't quite work. I knew what luxury car leases cost, but I didn't want to be the friend who interrogated her about her choices. Maybe she'd negotiated something incredible. Maybe she had savings I didn't know about. Then came the designer handbags. Nicole had never been particularly label conscious before. She was more of a practical backpack kind of person, someone who valued function over fashion. But suddenly she was carrying a different designer bag every week. A Gucci one day, Louis Vuitton the next, a Prada bag the week after that. Each one cost thousands of dollars. When I'd compliment them, she'd say they were gifts or she'd found them on sale, but I'd see the tags still attached sometimes, showing full retail prices. The expensive dinners she'd post about on Instagram became more frequent. Michelin-starred restaurants, exclusive wine bars, the kind of places where an appetizer costs $40. She'd gone on a weekend trip to Napa Valley, staying at a resort I knew cost at least $500 a night. When I'd asked about it, she'd shrugged and said, "I'm just treating myself, Vic. We work so hard, we deserve nice things. You should do the same. Get out there. Enjoy life a little." She wasn't wrong about working hard, but something felt off. We paid ourselves the same salary. We had the same expenses. Rent, utilities, the usual stuff. Her lifestyle didn't match her income, but I pushed the concern down. Maybe she had savings I didn't know about. Maybe her parents were helping her. Maybe she'd made some good investments. It wasn't my place to question how she spent her money. Partners don't police each other's personal finances. That would be controlling and weird, but the nagging feeling wouldn't go away. It sat in my stomach like a stone, especially when I'd look at our company's dwindling profit margins and then see Nicole's latest Instagram post from some expensive restaurant. The weird phone calls started about 4 months ago. I'd walk into our shared office space, a bright, modern suite in a renovated warehouse with exposed brick and huge windows, and Nicole would be on her phone, speaking in hushed tones. Her back would be to me, her voice lowered almost to a whisper. The moment she'd see me, she'd quickly end the call, often in the middle of what seemed like an important conversation. "Okay, gotta go, talk later. Bye," she'd say rapidly, then turn to me with a bright smile. "Hey, didn't hear you come in. Everything okay?" I'd ask. "Work call?" "Just a vendor," she'd explain. Or personal call, nothing important. Or my mom being dramatic about something silly. Always a quick, dismissive explanation that discouraged follow-up questions. Her desk, which used to be an organized chaos of sticky notes and sketches and sample products, became meticulously clean. Nicole had never been neat. Her space had always been a creative explosion, and she joked that she knew where everything was in her system. But suddenly, her desk was clear except for her laptop and a single plant. She started locking her computer screen every time she stepped away, even if it was just to grab coffee from the kitchen 5 feet away or to use the bathroom down the hall. When I'd tease her about becoming so security conscious, she'd laugh it off. "Just being more professional," she'd say. "We're handling sensitive client data. It's a good habit." She was right, of course. It was a good habit, but it was also very unlike her. And the way she'd physically angle her screen away from me when I'd walk past her desk, the way she'd close browser tabs quickly when I approached, those weren't professional habits. Those were the actions of someone hiding something. Marcus became increasingly distant around the same time. Our regular Thursday night dinners, a tradition we'd maintained religiously for nearly 2 years, started getting canceled. "I'm so sorry, babe." He'd text me Thursday afternoon. "Huge fire at work. Have to stay late and fix this bug before deployment tomorrow. Rain check?" It happened once, which was understandable. Then twice. Then it became more common than not. Our Thursday tradition turned into a Thursday hope that usually ended in disappointment. Weekend trips we'd planned would get canceled at the last minute. We'd been supposed to go to the coast for a long weekend, a trip we'd been looking forward to for months. I'd already booked a little cottage right on the beach. 2 days before we were supposed to leave, he'd called me, sounding stressed and apologetic. "Vic, I'm so sorry. This project at work is completely off the rails. I can't leave town right now. They're talking about pushing our launch back by a month if we don't fix this." I'd understood. Work emergencies happen. I'd been disappointed but supportive. It's okay, I told him. We'll reschedule. Work comes first sometimes. But it kept happening. Every plan we made seemed to fall through at the last minute because of work. His startup was apparently in a constant state of crisis. I'd started to wonder what kind of operation they were running that required so many late nights and weekend emergencies. When we were together, he seemed preoccupied, constantly checking his phone. We'd be watching a movie on the couch, supposedly having a relaxing evening, and his phone would buzz. He'd pick it up, read whatever message he'd received, and get this little smile, not a big grin, just a subtle upturn of his lips, a slight softening of his eyes. It was the kind of smile you give when you're thinking about something pleasant, something private. When I'd ask, "Who's texting you?" he'd lock his phone and toss it aside. "Just work stuff," he'd say, or "Nothing important." But I'd see him texting late at night. I'd wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning, half conscious, and the blue light from his phone would be illuminating his face in the darkness. He'd be sitting up in bed, scrolling, typing, that same little smile playing on his lips. When I'd mumble, "Everything okay?" he'd startle, quickly lock his phone, and slide back down beside me. "Yeah, fine, just couldn't sleep. Go back to bed." His phone was always face down. On the counter, on the table, on the nightstand. Always face down. Even when we were just the two of us in his apartment, even when there was no reason for secrecy, the phone was face down. If we were watching a movie and he got up to get a drink, he'd flip it over before leaving the room. It became such an automatic gesture that I don't think he even realized he was doing it. When I'd ask, just gently, trying not to sound accusatory, "Who are you texting so much lately?" he'd flip it around on me. The gaslighting was an art form, so subtle and skillful that I didn't even recognize it as gaslighting at first. "Really? Why are you so controlling, Victoria? Don't you trust me? God, you're getting so insecure lately. Is it the stress from work? You've been really different lately, you know that? Really paranoid and suspicious. It's not attractive." And like an idiot, I'd apologize. I would actually apologize for feeling suspicious, for trusting my gut that was screaming at me that something was deeply wrong. "I'm sorry," I'd say. "You're right. I've been stressed. Work has been crazy. I don't mean to be paranoid." And he'd soften, pull me into a hug, kiss the top of my head. "It's okay, babe. I know you're under a lot of pressure. But you have to trust me. I love you. I'm not going anywhere." Except he was going somewhere. He was going to Nicole. I remember one night about a month before it all blew up. The three of us were having dinner at our usual Italian place. It was a warm evening in late February, one of those false spring nights Portland sometimes gets where you can almost believe winter is over. We were sitting on the heated patio, drinking red wine, laughing about something stupid one of our clients had requested. They wanted us to make their septic tank service company go viral on TikTok and couldn't understand why we were gently pushing back on that strategy. "To good friends," Marcus had said, raising his glass, "and to building something beautiful together." We all clinked glasses, and in that moment, I felt overwhelmingly grateful. I had a thriving business with my best friend. I had a loving boyfriend. I had a life I'd built through hard work and determination. Everything was perfect. But then I noticed something. Marcus had said, "building something beautiful together," while looking at me. But as the words left his mouth, his eyes had slid over to Nicole. They held each other's gaze for just a beat too long. Maybe 2 seconds, maybe 3, but long enough that my stomach did that familiar twist. A cold dread washed over me for a heartbeat. Nicole's cheeks had flushed slightly, and she'd looked down at her wine glass, a small smile playing at her lips. I took another sip of wine and told myself it was nothing. Just the wine making me silly and paranoid. Marcus was probably just including Nicole in the toast because she was there. I was reading into things, seeing patterns where there were none. That's what anxiety does. It makes you suspicious of innocent interactions. I needed to get a grip, but that moment stuck with me. It lodged itself in my brain, and late at night when I couldn't sleep, I'd replay it over and over. The way he'd looked at her, the way she'd blushed, the way they both quickly looked away, like children caught with their hands in the cookie jar. The week it happened, everything came crashing down in the most mundane possible way. I wasn't out of town for some dramatic reason. There was no conference, no emergency. I'd simply decided to come into the office early on a Tuesday morning in March. It was the kind of decision that seems completely unremarkable at the time, but ends up changing everything. I'd been having trouble sleeping for weeks, tossing and turning with a vague anxiety I couldn't name. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff in the dark, knowing there was a drop somewhere in front of me, but unable to see how far down it went. I'd lie in bed next to Marcus, listening to him breathe and feel this overwhelming sense of wrongness that I couldn't explain or articulate. So when I woke up at 5:30 a.m. that Tuesday, staring at the ceiling with my mind racing, I figured I might as well be productive. I got up, quietly, showered, dressed, and drove to the office in the pre-dawn darkness. Portland was still asleep, the streets empty except for a few delivery trucks and the occasional early morning jogger. I stopped at a coffee shop that opened at 6, got myself a large cappuccino and a chocolate croissant, and arrived at the office around 6:30 a.m. The office was dark and quiet. Nicole never arrived before 9 a.m. She was firmly team night owl, did her best work between 8 p.m. and midnight. Our other employees didn't start trickling in until 8:30 or 9. I had the place completely to myself, and there was something peaceful about it. The office without people felt different, calmer, more contemplative. Just me and the hum of the computers and the soft patter of rain against the big windows. I made a fresh pot of coffee in our small kitchen. We had a fancy espresso machine that Nicole had insisted we buy, saying it was important for office morale, and settled at my desk to review our quarterly financial reports. We had a board meeting coming up in 2 weeks with our small group of investors, and I wanted everything to be perfect. These were people who'd believed in us when we were nothing, who'd written checks based on faith and a PowerPoint presentation. I wanted to show them their faith had been well placed. I pulled up our business banking portal and started cross-referencing expenses with our accounting software. This was tedious work, the kind of thing I usually put off, but I had the time and the quiet to really dig into it. Line by line, I compared what we'd spent with what we'd recorded. For the first hour, everything matched up. Rent, utilities, software subscriptions, employee salaries, all exactly where they should be. And then I found it. A payment of $8,500 to a vendor I didn't recognize. Cascade Marketing Solutions. I frowned at the screen, trying to place the name. Had we outsourced something I'd forgotten about? But no, we didn't outsource. That was literally our business. We were the marketing company. We were the ones other businesses hired to do their marketing. Why would we be paying another marketing company? I searched our email for any correspondence about Cascade Marketing Solutions. I typed it into the search bar and waited for results. Nothing came up. Not a single email thread. I checked our contracts folder in our shared drive, thinking maybe Nicole had set up some kind of partnership I'd missed. Nothing there either. I searched our project management software, our Slack channels, our internal documents. Not a single mention of Cascade Marketing Solutions anywhere in our digital ecosystem. But there were more payments to this company. Many more. My heart started to pound as I scrolled through the transaction history. $8,500 here, $12,000 there, $6,800 the month before that. Going back months, 6 months of regular payments to this company that, as far as I could tell, didn't exist in any of our records. I started tallying it up in a spreadsheet, my hands shaking so badly I kept making typos and having to delete and retype. $8,500, $12,000, $6,800, $9,200, on and on. The number grew and grew. When I finally reached the end of the 6-month period, the total made me feel like I was going to vomit. Over $150,000. We had paid over $150,000 to a company that had no paper trail, no contract, no email correspondence, no nothing. My hands were shaking as I Googled Cascade Marketing Solutions Portland. Nothing came up. No website, no LinkedIn page, no Facebook business profile, no Google listing. For a marketing company to have zero online presence was more than suspicious. It was impossible. In our industry, if you don't exist online, you don't exist at all. The only Cascade Marketing Solutions I could find was a company in Florida that had shut down 3 years ago. This couldn't be real. There had to be an explanation. Maybe it was some kind of accounting error. Maybe the payments had been miscategorized. Maybe Nicole had set this up for some legitimate business reason and just hadn't told me yet. Maybe there was a perfectly reasonable explanation that would make me feel foolish for ever doubting her. But that cold feeling in my stomach said otherwise. That voice that had been whispering to me for months was now screaming. Something was very, very wrong. I started going through other expenses with a fine-tooth comb, and that's when the dam broke completely. It wasn't just Cascade Marketing Solutions. There were payments to consultants I'd never heard of. People with generic names like John Smith Consulting and Sarah Johnson Strategic Advisory. When I Googled them, they didn't exist. There were software subscriptions for tools I'd never heard of us using, with prices that seemed inflated. Office supply expenses that were triple what they should be. How does a 15-person office go through $3,000 worth of office supplies in a single month? The deeper I dug, the worse it got. Equipment purchases that I'd never seen arrive at the office. Conference registrations for events Nicole had supposedly attended, but when I checked the conference websites, the dates didn't match up with when she'd been out of the office. Travel expenses for client meetings in cities where we didn't have clients. Every single one of these expenses had been approved by Nicole. She had signing authority on the business accounts, just as I did. We'd set it up that way deliberately so that neither of us would be a bottleneck if the other was busy or out of office. It was supposed to be a system of mutual trust, a way to keep the business running smoothly. Instead, she'd used that trust to rob me blind. I felt like I couldn't breathe. The office walls seemed to be closing in on me. This couldn't be happening. This wasn't possible. Nicole was my best friend. She was like a sister to me. We'd built this company together, from nothing. We'd struggled together, celebrated together, dreamed together. This had to be some kind of mistake. There had to be an explanation. But deep down, in that place where truth lives before we're ready to acknowledge it, I knew. I knew exactly what this was. All those little inconsistencies. All those moments when my gut had screamed at me that something was wrong. All the times I'd told myself I was being paranoid. My instincts had been right all along. I spent the next 3 hours in a kind of fugue state, methodically printing everything. Bank statements, transaction records, invoices, payment authorizations. The printer in the corner of the office ran hot, churning out page after page of evidence, the warm smell of toner filling the air. I created detailed spreadsheets tracking every suspicious transaction, color-coding them by type. Red for fake vendors, blue for inflated expenses, green for unexplained payments. By the time I was done, I had a 3-inch stack of papers and a sick, hollow feeling in my stomach that no amount of coffee could fix. The total damage was staggering. Over $250,000, $250,000, stolen from the company I'd poured my life into. Money that should have been in our accounts, building our future, securing our employees' jobs, giving us a cushion against hard times. Instead, it had disappeared into a black hole with Nicole's signature on the authorization forms. I sat there at my desk, surrounded by evidence, and tried to process what this meant. This wasn't a mistake or an oversight. This was systematic, premeditated theft. This was fraud, and it had been going on for at least 6 months, probably longer. How much more would I find if I went back further? And then a horrible thought occurred to me. Marcus's questions. All those detailed questions about our financial systems, our approval processes, our vendor management, the way he'd asked so carefully about who could authorize payments and whether we required documentation. He'd been gathering intelligence, figuring out the weaknesses in our system. He was in on it. My boyfriend and my best friend had been conspiring against me. Together. The betrayal hit me in waves. First Nicole, the friend I trusted with everything. Then Marcus, the man I'd thought I might marry. They'd been working together to destroy me. For how long? How long had they been planning this? And then another realization, even more sickening. If they'd been working together to steal from my company, what else had they been doing together? Nicole arrived at 9:15 a.m., exactly as she always did, breezing in with her usual bright energy. She was wearing designer jeans that probably cost more than our monthly office rent and carrying a Starbucks cup in one hand and her expensive handbag in the other. She had sunglasses perched on her head even though it was drizzling outside, because of course she did. "Morning, Vic," she called out cheerfully, heading to her desk. "Ugh, I am so tired. Didn't sleep well last night. You know how it is, your brain just won't shut off sometimes. Oh, but I stopped by that new bakery on Division Street on my way here. They have these amazing almond croissants. Want me to run back and get you one?" I looked up from my computer, my face carefully neutral. I'd had 3 hours to prepare for this moment, to school my expression into something normal. "I'm good, thanks," I said, my voice sounding remarkably steady. "How was your evening?" "Oh, quiet night at home," she said, settling into her chair and waking up her computer. "Ordered Thai food, watched some Netflix, crashed early. The exciting life of an entrepreneur." She laughed, taking a sip of her coffee. I watched her, this person I thought I knew better than anyone, and marveled at how easily the lies came, how comfortable she looked, how relaxed. How many times had she lied to me like this? How many times had I believed her without question? "Actually, I'm glad you're here," I said, keeping my voice casual. "I was just doing some bookkeeping for the board meeting, and I wanted to run a few things by you." "Sure, what's up?" She was barely paying attention, scrolling through something on her phone. "I'm seeing some payments to a company called Cascade Marketing Solutions," I said, watching her face carefully. "Can you refresh my memory on what they do for us?" For just a fraction of a second, she froze. It was barely perceptible, just a tiny pause in her scrolling, a slight tensing of her shoulders, but I saw it. Then she looked up, her expression curious and unconcerned. "Cascade Marketing? Oh, they're an SEO contractor we brought on for the Davidson account. I'm pretty sure I mentioned it in one of our Monday meetings." "The Davidson account?" I repeated slowly. "The account we landed in January?" "Yeah, that's the one. They've been doing really great work for us, actually. Really improving their search rankings." "That's interesting," I said, my heart pounding, but my voice still calm, because these payments started back in September, 4 months before we landed Davidson. The silence that followed was heavy. I could practically see her brain working, trying to come up with another lie, another explanation. She laughed, a bit too loudly. "Did they? Huh. Maybe it was for the Peterson pitch then. Or was it Henderson? God, we've been juggling so many prospects lately. It all blurs together. You know how crazy things have been, Vic. It's hard to keep track of everything." "Right," I said softly, not breaking eye contact. "It is hard to keep track." She held my gaze for a moment, and I saw the calculations happening behind her eyes. How much did I know? What had I found? Could she talk her way out of this? "You know what?" she said finally, breaking the stare and turning to her computer. "Let me pull up the contract and refresh my memory on the specifics. I've got it saved somewhere. Give me a minute to find it." "Take your time," I said, turning back to my own screen. But I wasn't looking at anything. I was just giving her space to dig herself deeper, to tell more lies, to build the case against herself. We worked in silence for the next few hours, the air in the office thick with unspoken tension. I could feel her watching me when she thought I wasn't looking. I could sense her worry building. She knew something was off. She just didn't know how much I'd figured out. At lunch, she suddenly announced she had to run out for a quick errand. "Be back in an hour," she said, grabbing her keys and practically running out the door. The moment she was gone, I knew exactly what she was doing. She was calling Marcus. She was panicking. They were figuring out their next move. I had to make mine first. I left the office at 2 p.m., telling our assistant that I had a dentist appointment. Instead, I drove straight to Marcus's apartment. He worked from home most days, so I knew he'd be there. My hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel the entire drive, my mind churning with questions and suspicions, and a growing sense of dread. His apartment was in the Pearl District, a trendy neighborhood full of art galleries and expensive boutiques. His building was new construction, all glass and steel, with a doorman and a fitness center and a rooftop terrace. It was the kind of place that cost at least $3,000 a month for a one-bedroom. I'd always thought he must have savings or maybe help from his parents to afford it, but now I wondered, how much of my money was paying for his upscale lifestyle? I used my key to let myself into his apartment. The place was quiet, except for the clicking of keyboard keys coming from his home office down the hall. I took off my shoes, a habit from my mother's house that I'd never broken, and walked quietly toward the sound. He was at his desk, focused intently on his dual monitors, wearing the noise-canceling headphones I'd bought him for Christmas, the ones that cost $300, because he'd hinted that he really wanted them, but couldn't justify the expense. The irony wasn't lost on me. I stood in the doorway watching him for a long moment. This man I'd loved. This man I'd planned a future with. This man I'd trusted completely. His dark hair was slightly messy, the way it always got when he was deep in concentration. He had that little furrow between his eyebrows that appeared when he was thinking hard. He'd taken off his shirt because he always ran hot when he worked, and I could see the tattoo on his shoulder blade, a geometric pattern he'd gotten in college. I traced that tattoo with my fingers countless times, and then I focused on what was actually on his screens and the dropped out of my stomach. Financial spreadsheets, bank account information, transaction records, and in the tab bar at the top of his browser, I could clearly see Cascade Marketing Solutions, account dashboard. The world tilted. My vision went spotty at the edges, that gray fuzziness that happens when you're about to faint. I grabbed the doorframe to steady myself, and the movement must have caught his peripheral vision because he suddenly turned around, pulling off his headphones. "Vic, hey baby!" He smiled, surprised but not alarmed. "Yet, what are you doing home? I thought you had back-to-back meetings today." His hand moved toward his mouse, and I watched him start to close the browser windows. Quick, practice movements. He'd done this before, many times, whenever I'd walked into a room unexpectedly. "Don't," I said, my voice cold and steady in a way that surprised even me. "Don't close those windows." His hand froze on the mouse. The smile faltered on his face. "What?" "Vic, these are just work files. I have NDAs and—" "What is Cascade Marketing Solutions?" I asked, cutting him off. I stayed in the doorway, not moving closer, my arms crossed over my chest like armor. What? I don't. He was stammering, his usual smooth confidence evaporating like morning mist. That's just a freelance project I'm working on. Side hustle stuff, nothing important. A side hustle, I repeated flatly. A marketing company. You, a software engineer with no marketing experience, have a side hustle as a marketing company. It's just consulting work, helping them with their tech infrastructure. It's boring stuff, really. Why are you... Show me your screen, I interrupted. Victoria, you're being weird. This is my private work. You can't just... Show me your screen. Each word was deliberate, hard as stone. We stared at each other. I watched him make the calculation, weighing his options. Could he talk his way out of this? Could he gaslight me one more time, convince me I was overreacting, being paranoid, being controlling? I saw him consider it, saw the wheels turning. Then his face changed. The mask slipped, revealing something underneath that I'd never seen before. It was contempt. Pure, undisguised contempt. The look you give something you consider beneath you, unworthy of your respect. Fine, he said, his voice taking on a hard edge I'd never heard before. He turned back to his monitors and maximized the windows he'd been minimizing. You want to see? Here. This is Cascade Marketing Solutions. This is the shell company Nicole and I set up 6 months ago. These are the transfers from Lighthouse Digital. And this, he clicked to another tab, is our business plan for when we launch our own agency next quarter. Pretty simple, really. I felt like I was in a dream, one of those nightmares where you're trying to scream but no sound comes out. I moved closer on autopilot, my feet carrying me forward, even though every instinct said to run. I looked at his screens, at the numbers that confirmed my worst fears. Bank account balances. Over $200,000 sitting in an account under the name Cascade Marketing Solutions LLC. Transaction records showing systematic transfers from my company's accounts. Spreadsheets detailing planned expenses for a new business launch. A business plan with both his and Nicole's names listed as co-founders. You've been stealing from my company, I said, the words feeling surreal as they left my mouth. You and Nicole. Together. Stealing is such an ugly word, he said, leaning back in his expensive office chair. Another thing I'd helped him pick out. Nicole is a partner in the company. She has every right to approve expenses. This is more like creative accounting. Creative accounting, I echoed, my brain struggling to process his casual admission. You embezzled over $200,000 from my business and you're calling it creative accounting? He shrugged. Actually shrugged, like we were discussing what to have for dinner. We prefer to think of it as our severance package, a parting gift from Lighthouse Digital to help us start our new venture. Severance package? My voice was rising now, the shock giving way to fury. We're partners. Nicole and I built this company together. You can't just... Nicole is my partner now, he interrupted, standing up from his chair. He was taller than me, and he used that height to his advantage, looking down at me with that contemptuous expression. We've been together for almost a year, Vic. Did you really not know? Were you really that clueless? The words hit me like physical blows. A year. They'd been together for a year. While I was planning a future with Marcus, he was with Nicole. While Nicole and I were building our business, she was plotting to destroy it. A year of lies, of deception, of betrayal so complete it made my previous understanding of the words seem naive. A year? My voice cracked, and I hated myself for showing weakness. You've been cheating on me for a year? With Nicole? Oh, don't be so dramatic, he said, rolling his eyes in exasperation. It's not like we planned it. It just happened. We connected, we fell in love, and we realized we wanted to build something together. You were always so focused on work, Victoria, always stressed, always worried about numbers and clients and growth strategies. Nicole actually knows how to have fun. She's spontaneous, exciting. You became predictable, boring. Each word was a knife. Boring, predictable. As if my dedication to the business we all supposedly cared about was a character flaw. As if working hard to build something sustainable made me less worthy of love and loyalty. So you decided to rob me? I asked, my voice shaking now with rage. Because I was boring, you thought it was okay to steal from me? We didn't steal from you, he said impatiently, like I was a slow child who couldn't grasp a simple concept. Nicole and I are planning to buy you out of Lighthouse Digital anyway. We've been talking to investors about launching our own agency. Nicole has all the client relationships, all the creative talent. The staff love her. We don't need you. This money is just an advance on our future equity. An advance, I repeated numbly. You stole $250,000 as an advance on equity you don't have in a buyout I never agreed to. You'll agree, he said confidently, crossing his arms. When Nicole and I present our terms, you'll agree. Because if you don't, we'll make it very clear to clients and investors that you've been the problem all along. The micromanaging, controlling partner who stifled creativity and drove talent away. Nicole's the face of the company anyway. Everyone knows that. The sheer arrogance of it took my breath away. They'd planned this, thought it through, built their scheme on the assumption that I'd just roll over and accept my own destruction. Marcus pulled out his phone, his back partially to me now, completely unconcerned about my presence. Look, I'm gonna call Nicole and tell her you know. We weren't planning to pull the trigger on this until next month, but whatever, it's happening now. He started to dial, his movements casual, relaxed, and that's when something inside me snapped. Not into rage, not into tears, into absolute crystal clear focus. It was like someone had turned on a spotlight in my brain, illuminating exactly what I needed to do. I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recorder app, my hands surprisingly steady. I hit record and cleared my throat. Marcus, just to be absolutely clear from my understanding, you're admitting that you and Nicole created a fake company called Cascade Marketing Solutions and have been embezzling money from Lighthouse Digital for the past 6 months? He glanced over his shoulder at me, phone pressed to his ear, and actually laughed. It was a dismissive, condescending laugh that made my blood boil. Yeah, Victoria, that's exactly what we did. What are you going to do about it? Call the police? He laughed again. Nicole's got signing authority, same as you. She approved all those expenses. It's not illegal if a partner approves it. It's just business. You might not like it, but there's nothing criminal about it. He was wrong about that, but I didn't correct him. I just kept recording. And you're confirming that you and Nicole have been in a romantic relationship for approximately 1 year, while you were simultaneously in a relationship with me? Oh my God, yes. His voice was dripping with irritation. Are you going to make a whole federal case out of this? We're adults, Victoria. People break up. People fall in love with other people. It happens. Get over it. Nicole must have answered because his attention shifted completely to the phone call. Hey, babe. Yeah, she knows. She showed up at my place and saw the accounts. Yeah, she's freaking out, being super dramatic about the whole thing, as expected. No, I don't think she's going to be reasonable about this. We might need to accelerate our timeline. I stopped recording. I had everything I needed. Every admission, every confession, every detail of their conspiracy captured in crystal clear audio. Without another word, I turned around and walked toward the door. Behind me, I heard Marcus still talking to Nicole, his voice carrying down the hallway. She's leaving. Yeah, just walking out. I told you she wouldn't have the spine to actually do anything. She'll cry about it for a few days, and then she'll sign whatever we put in front of her. Trust me, I know her. She's weak. I stopped at the apartment door, my hand on the handle. I didn't turn around. I just spoke into the space between us, my voice clear and steady. No, Marcus, you don't know me at all. You thought you did, but you never really saw me. That's going to be your biggest mistake. Whatever, Victoria. He called back dismissively. Don't forget to leave your key on the counter on your way out. I did leave the key. I set it down carefully on his expensive granite counter, next to the French press I'd bought him and the cast iron skillet we'd picked out together. I looked around his apartment one last time, this space I'd spent so many nights in, where I'd cooked dinners and watched movies and imagined a future. It all felt foreign now, like a stage set for a play that had already closed. Then I walked out and closed the door behind me, leaving Marcus and that entire version of my life behind. I made it to my car before the shaking started. I sat in the parking garage, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, and I started to laugh. Not a happy laugh, a slightly unhinged, disbelieving, can't believe this is my actual life laugh. They thought they'd won. They thought they were so clever, so smart that they'd outmaneuvered me completely. They thought I was weak, that I'd cry and break and give them whatever they wanted. They had absolutely no idea what was coming. I drove straight to the law offices of Morrison & Associates, a firm I'd worked with a couple of years ago on some contract disputes. I'd been impressed by their aggressive approach and attention to detail. Now I needed that aggression directed on my behalf. I walked into their sleek downtown office and asked the receptionist if Patricia Morrison was available. I don't have an appointment, I said, but I have an urgent matter involving business fraud and embezzlement. If she can give me 15 minutes, I can make it worth her time. The receptionist, a young woman with kind eyes, must have seen something in my face, the barely controlled fury, the determination, the desperation. She picked up her phone. Let me see what I can do. 10 minutes later, I was sitting across from Patricia Morrison in her corner office with a view of the Willamette River. She was exactly as I remembered her. Late 50s, steel gray hair cut in a sharp bob, eyes that missed nothing, dressed in a perfectly tailored navy suit that probably cost more than my car payment. She had the look of a woman who'd seen every variation of human deception and wasn't impressed by any of it. I laid out everything. The fake vendor payments, the months of systematic embezzlement, Nicole's betrayal, Marcus's involvement, the affair, the recording of his confession. I showed her the stack of financial documents I'd printed that morning, the spreadsheets I'd created, the recording on my phone. My voice stayed steady through most of it, though it cracked once or twice when I talked about the friendship I'd lost. Patricia listened without interrupting, taking precise notes in elegant handwriting. When I finished, she looked up at me with an expression that made me think of a shark scenting blood in the water. Miss Victoria, she said, her voice crisp and professional, what your partner has done is textbook embezzlement, wire fraud, and potentially money laundering, depending on how they've been moving and using these funds. What your boyfriend has done is conspiracy to commit fraud, potentially identity theft if he helped set up these fake vendor accounts, and a whole host of other charges. This isn't just a civil matter where we sue for damages. This is criminal. These people need to go to prison. Prison. The word hung in the air between us, heavy and final. I'm going to be very direct with you, Patricia continued, leaning forward slightly. You have an extraordinarily strong case. The documentation is clear, the pattern is obvious, and you have a recorded confession. But pursuing criminal charges against your best friend and your boyfriend, even your ex-boyfriend, is going to be brutal. It will be in the news. It will be messy. There will be people who think you're vindictive, who'll say you're overreacting. Are you prepared for that? I thought about Nicole's face when she'd lied to me that morning. I thought about Marcus's contemptuous sneer when he'd called me weak. I thought about the 15 employees at Lighthouse Digital who were counting on me to protect the company they'd helped build. I thought about every small business owner who trusted us with their marketing, their growth, their dreams. I'm prepared, I said firmly. What do we need to do? First, we go to the police, Patricia said, already pulling up contacts on her computer. I have a relationship with the financial crimes unit. We file a formal complaint and provide them with all this evidence. Then they'll open an investigation. In the meantime, we file for an emergency injunction to freeze any accounts associated with Cascade Marketing Solutions and to remove Nicole from all Lighthouse Digital accounts effective immediately. We move fast, we move hard, and we give them no time to hide assets or destroy evidence. How fast can we do this? I asked. Patricia glanced at her watch. It was 3:30 p.m. If you're free right now, we can be at the police station by 4. We can have the injunction filed by close of business today. By tomorrow morning, they'll wake up to a very different world than the one they're expecting. Let's do it, I said. All of it. We went to the Portland Police Bureau's central precinct downtown. The building was institutional and intimidating, all concrete and glass with that particular smell that government buildings have, floor cleaner and old coffee and stress. Patricia led me through the maze of hallways to the financial crimes unit, where we met with Detective James Kowalski. Detective Kowalski was in his late 40s, with tired eyes that had probably seen every flavor of human greed and stupidity. He wore an off-the-rack suit and had the weary demeanor of someone who'd long ago stopped being surprised by what people would do for money. But when Patricia introduced me and explained why we were there, his eyes sharpened with interest. I gave my statement, walking him through everything chronologically. He asked pointed, intelligent questions, making notes on a yellow legal pad. When I played him the recording of Marcus's confession, he actually smiled, a grim, satisfied smile. "This is good," he said when the recording finished. "This is very good. People usually aren't dumb enough to confess on tape. Makes my job a lot easier." He looked at the stack of financial documents I'd brought. "And you have documentation of all these transactions?" "Every single one," I said. 6 months of fraudulent payments, all with transaction IDs, dates, and authorization codes, plus the articles of incorporation for Cascade Marketing Solutions, which list Marcus as the registered agent and sole member. Detective Kowalski nodded, flipping through the papers. "Here's what's going to happen. I'm opening an official investigation as of right now. We'll need to do a full forensic audit of your company's accounts and this Cascade Marketing Solutions account. That'll take a few days. In the meantime, I need you to not contact either of these individuals. Don't call, don't text, don't email. Let us do our work. Can you do that?" "Yes," I said. "Absolutely." "Good. I'm going to be honest with you. This is a strong case. Really strong. The documentation is clear, the pattern is obvious, and that recording is basically a gift-wrapped confession. I'd estimate we'll have enough for arrest warrants within 48 to 72 hours. But I want to dig deeper first, make sure there isn't more fraud we're not seeing yet. Sometimes when people do this, the amount you initially discover is just the tip of the iceberg." That thought made me feel sick. What if there was more? What if they'd been stealing for longer than 6 months? How deep did this betrayal go? Patricia filed the emergency injunction before the courthouse closed at 5 p.m. By 5:30, a judge had signed it. All accounts related to Cascade Marketing Solutions were frozen. Nicole was immediately removed from all signatory authority on Lighthouse Digital accounts. Any assets in her name that could be connected to the fraud were frozen pending investigation. They'll find out about this tomorrow morning when they try to access accounts, Patricia explained as we left the courthouse. By which point, Detective Kowalski will be deep into his investigation. You've essentially locked them in place. They can't move money, they can't hide assets, they can't run. They're trapped. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I just felt exhausted. The adrenaline that had been carrying me through the day was fading, leaving behind a bone-deep weariness. "Go home," Patricia said, not unkindly. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a very long day. Don't go to your office. I don't want you anywhere near Nicole until the police have made contact with her. Call in sick, take a personal day, whatever. Just stay away." I did go home, to the apartment I'd been renting in the Hawthorne district. It was a small one-bedroom in an old building, nothing fancy, but it was mine. Marcus had never had a key to this space. We always stayed at his place because it was nicer, more comfortable. Now I was grateful for that boundary I'd maintained, that one part of my life he hadn't infiltrated. I made myself eat something, a bowl of cereal, because I couldn't handle anything more complex. I tried to watch TV, but couldn't focus on anything. My mind kept racing, replaying the day's events on an endless loop. Marcus's face when he'd called me boring. Nicole's casual lies, the contempt in both their voices. My phone kept buzzing. Messages from Nicole, casual and friendly as if nothing was wrong. "Hey, where'd you disappear to this afternoon? Everything okay? And don't forget we have that client call tomorrow at 10. And want to grab dinner this week? Haven't had quality girl time in forever." The audacity of it. The sheer, breathtaking audacity. She knew I discovered something that morning. She had to know. But she was still playing the game, still pretending, still lying, even when the truth was already crumbling around her. I didn't respond to any of the messages. Detective Kowalski had been clear. No contact. Let them think I was sulking. Let them think I was too weak to confront them. Let them believe whatever made them feel safe. They'd find out the truth soon enough. I finally fell asleep around 2 a.m., more from exhaustion than any sense of peace. The next morning, I woke to my phone ringing. It was 7:15 a.m. Patricia's name showed on the screen. "They've been arrested," she said without preamble when I answered. "Both of them. Detective Kowalski executed search warrants at both residences at 6 this morning. They're in custody now." I sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake. "Already? I thought you said 48 to 72 hours. Kowalski worked fast, and they found more than we initially thought. Apparently Nicole had set up multiple fake vendor accounts, not just Cascade Marketing Solutions. There was also Pacific Coast Consulting, Northwest Creative Services, and Columbia River Media. They've been systematically draining your company for almost a year, not 6 months. The total is closer to $350,000. $350,000. The number was so large it didn't even feel real. That was nearly half of what we'd earned in the past year. No wonder our profit margins had been shrinking. No wonder I'd been stressed about cash flow. There's more," Patricia continued. "They also found evidence that they were planning to drain your operating accounts entirely next week. They'd already set up the transfers. You calling us when you did prevented them from bankrupting Lighthouse Digital completely." I felt like I was going to be sick. They weren't just stealing from me. They were planning to destroy me, to leave me with nothing. And then what? Were they going to watch me lose everything while they started their new business with my money? "I wanted to give you a heads up before this hits the news," Patricia said. "Because it's going to hit the news. Local business owner arrested for embezzling hundreds of thousands from her own company. That's the kind of story that gets attention. You should prepare for calls from reporters, from clients, from anyone who might be concerned about Lighthouse Digital stability." She was right. By 9 a.m., it was everywhere. Local news websites, business journals, social media. Portland marketing exec arrested in embezzlement scheme. Business partners turned criminals, the Lighthouse Digital fraud case. Digital marketing firm rocked by internal theft. Our company's name was in every headline. My name was in half of them, usually with phrases like victim of elaborate fraud or founder discovers partner's betrayal. My phone exploded with notifications. Clients, employees, former colleagues, friends I hadn't talked to in years. Everyone wanted to know what happened. If the company was okay. If I was okay. I called an emergency all-staff meeting for 11 a.m. I needed to talk to my employees before they heard everything from the news. They deserved honesty and transparency from me. The 15 people who worked for Lighthouse Digital gathered in our conference room at exactly 11. You could have heard a pin drop. Their faces were anxious, scared. They'd all seen the news. They knew Nicole had been arrested. Some of them were crying. Maya, our junior designer who Nicole had personally hired and mentored, had red, puffy eyes. She'd clearly been crying all morning. James, our senior account manager, looked grim but composed, sitting with his arms crossed. Sophie, our social media coordinator, was nervously picking at her cuticles. Alex, our newest hire, looked like they wanted to bolt from the room. I stood at the head of the table and took a deep breath. I know you've all seen the news about Nicole. I want to be completely honest with you about what's happened, as much as I legally can while there's an ongoing criminal investigation. I explained, as clearly and factually as I could, that I'd discovered significant financial fraud, that Nicole had been creating fake vendor accounts and systematically stealing from the company for almost a year, that I'd reported it to the police immediately upon discovery, that she'd been arrested that morning, along with an accomplice. I know many of you were close to Nicole, I said, my voice thick with emotion I couldn't quite suppress. I know some of you considered her a friend, a mentor. I did too. This betrayal isn't just professional for me, it's deeply personal. But I want you to know that Lighthouse Digital is going to survive this. We're solvent. Your jobs are secure, we have good clients, we do excellent work, and we're going to get through this together. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Maya raised her hand, tears streaming down her face. How much? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. How much did she steal? I debated whether to share this number, but they deserved the truth. Based on what's been discovered so far, approximately $350,000. Gasps around the table. Someone swore quietly. Sophie started crying. That's enough to have bankrupted us, James said grimly. If you hadn't caught it, we'd all be out of jobs right now. Yes, I agreed, which is why I reported it immediately. This wasn't about revenge or anger. This was about protecting this company and all of you. What do you need from us? James asked, leaning forward. That question, that simple offer of support, made my throat tight. I need you to trust me. I need you to help me reassure our clients that we're stable and reliable. I need you to keep doing the excellent work you've always done. And I need you to know that I will never, ever let something like this happen again. I'm implementing new financial controls immediately. No single person will ever again have the authority to approve large expenses alone. Everything will require dual signatures. We'll have quarterly third-party audits. I'm going to rebuild the trust that was damaged, not just with you, but with our clients and our community. One by one, they nodded. Over the next few hours, as the initial shock wore off, they rallied. These people were professionals. They believed in the work we did. And despite everything, they believed in me. But it was hard. God, it was so hard. Every client call was a potential disaster. Some were supportive, expressing sympathy and reaffirming their commitment to us. Others were concerned, worried about the stability of their campaigns, wondering if they should find another agency. I spent hours on the phone, reassuring people, being transparent about what had happened while maintaining professionalism. We lost 3 clients in the first week. Small accounts, but it still stung. One of them explicitly said they didn't want to be associated with a company involved in criminal activity. Never mind that we were the victims. Never mind that I'd done everything right. The stain of scandal was enough. The legal process ground forward with agonizing slowness. Nicole and Marcus were both arraigned. Both pled not guilty. Nicole made bail. Her parents mortgaged their house to come up with the $50,000. The conditions of her bail included surrendering her passport and having absolutely no contact with me or anyone at Lighthouse Digital. Marcus was initially denied bail because he had no ties to the community. He'd moved to Portland from California 2 years ago and had no family in the area. His startup employer had immediately fired him. His lawyer argued that he wasn't a flight risk, but the prosecutor, an intense woman named Jennifer Chan, argued that he'd already demonstrated a willingness to engage in sophisticated financial crimes and had both the means and motivation to flee. The judge agreed and Marcus stayed in jail. Over the next few weeks, more details emerged. The forensic accountants hired by the police discovered even more fake vendor accounts. The total amount stolen climbed to over $400,000. They found emails between Nicole and Marcus discussing their plans in detail. Emails where they discussed my schedule, my habits, what excuses would work best to explain various expenses. They'd made spreadsheets tracking how much they'd taken and how much more they thought they could take before I noticed. They'd been planning to completely drain our operating account, all $180,000 of it, on March 15th. That was just a week away from when I discovered the fraud. If I'd waited even a few more days to dig into those financial records, Lighthouse Digital would have been bankrupt. We wouldn't have been able to make payroll. We wouldn't have been able to pay rent. Every one of my employees would have lost their jobs. The realization of how close we'd come to complete disaster made me physically ill. The text messages started about 3 weeks after the arrests. Nicole, in clear violation of her no-contact order, sent me a series of increasingly desperate messages from a new number I didn't have blocked yet. Victoria, please, we need to talk. We can explain everything. This is all a huge misunderstanding. You're ruining my life. I'm begging you, please talk to me. We can work this out. Marcus made me do it. He said it was just borrowing, that we'd pay it all back. I didn't understand what we were really doing. Please don't let them send me to prison. I'm begging you. I'll do anything. I'll pay it all back. Just please drop the charges. Each message was more desperate than the last. Reading them, I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no pity, no anger. Just a vast emptiness where my friendship with her used to live. This person pleading with me through text messages wasn't my friend Nicole. That person had never really existed. She'd been a performance, a character created to gain my trust so she could rob me blind. I forwarded every message to Detective Kowalski and to Patricia. Each one was another violation of her bail conditions, another piece of evidence demonstrating consciousness of guilt. Marcus's messages, when they finally came, were entirely different in tone. Where Nicole was panicked and apologetic, he was angry and threatening. "You vindictive bitch. I hope you're happy destroying 2 lives over money. This is all your fault. You know that? If you'd been a better girlfriend, if you hadn't been so fucking boring and uptight, none of this would have happened. You're going to regret this. When I get out, I'm going to make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are. Cold, controlling, crazy. I gave you 2 years of my life. I could have been with someone better. You owe me for wasting my time." Those messages went straight to Detective Kowalski too. Apparently threatening a witness in an ongoing criminal investigation is frowned upon by the judicial system. Who knew? Marcus's bail request was denied a second time. Nicole's lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal through Patricia. Nicole wanted to plead to a lesser charge, serve no jail time, and pay restitution on a payment plan. In exchange, she'd testify against Marcus as the mastermind of the operation. Patricia's response was ice cold and deeply satisfying. Your client had every opportunity to come clean. She chose greed. She systematically stole from her best friend and business partner for almost a year. She planned to bankrupt the company entirely. She violated her bail conditions multiple times by contacting the victim. She can take her chances with a jury. The preliminary hearing was in May, 2 months after the arrests. I had to testify, had to sit in a courtroom just 20 feet away from Nicole and Marcus and recount how they'd betrayed me, how they'd stolen from me, how they'd lied to me. Nicole cried through my entire testimony. Loud, dramatic sobs that her lawyer did nothing to quiet. She was wearing a conservative dress, had styled her hair simply, wore minimal makeup, clearly trying to look sympathetic and vulnerable. Every few minutes, she'd glance at me with these pleading eyes, like she was begging me to save her. I felt nothing. I looked right through her. Marcus sat stone-faced, his expression cold and arrogant. He was wearing a suit, probably one I'd helped him pick out for job interviews. His lawyer tried to argue that the evidence was circumstantial, that my recording had been obtained through entrapment, that I was a scorned ex-girlfriend, weaponizing the legal system for her revenge. Judge Sarah Martinez wasn't buying it. She was a no-nonsense woman in her early 60s who'd clearly presided over plenty of white-collar crime cases. After hearing all the evidence, the financial records, the fake company registrations, the emails, the recording, she bound both defendants over for trial on multiple felony counts. The prosecutor's office filed formal charges: 3 counts of felony theft in the first degree, 2 counts of wire fraud, 1 count of computer fraud, and 1 count of money laundering for Nicole. For Marcus, conspiracy to commit theft, wire fraud, money laundering, and identity theft for helping create the fake vendor identities. The sentence recommendations were severe: 3 to 5 years in prison for Nicole, with mandatory restitution. 5 to 7 years for Marcus, as the prosecutor argued he was the primary architect of the scheme. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I just felt tired. Tired and sad and angry at how much energy I had to spend on this instead of on rebuilding my business and my life. But slowly, painfully, I did rebuild. I brought in a third-party financial auditor who went through every single transaction in Lighthouse Digital's history with a microscope. We implemented the new financial controls I'd promised: dual signatures on everything over $500, monthly reviews by our accountant, quarterly audits. I was completely transparent with our remaining employees about what had happened and what we were doing to prevent it from ever happening again. And I started therapy. Real intensive therapy with Dr. Sarah Chen, a psychologist who specialized in trauma and betrayal. She helped me work through the complicated feelings I had about Nicole, about Marcus, about trust itself. "You're not weak for trusting them," she told me in one of our early sessions. "Trust is how healthy relationships work. You're human. They exploited that humanity. That's on them, not you." But it was hard to believe that. I kept going over every moment, every interaction, looking for the signs I'd missed, the red flags I'd dismissed, the instincts I'd ignored. "You're doing it again," Dr. Chen would say gently when I'd spiral into self-blame. "You're taking responsibility for their choices. You didn't make them steal. You didn't make them lie. They chose to do those things. Your only mistake was believing people you loved were telling you the truth. That's not a mistake. That's called being a normal human being." The sessions helped. Slowly, incrementally, I started to feel less broken. The trial was scheduled for September, but in August, both defendants took plea deals. The evidence against them was overwhelming, and their lawyers had to know they'd be convicted if it went to trial. Nicole pled guilty to 3 counts of felony theft in the first degree and 1 count of wire fraud. She was sentenced to 2 years in prison, 3 years of probation, and ordered to pay restitution of $200,000, roughly half of what they'd stolen. Marcus pled guilty to conspiracy to commit theft, wire fraud, money laundering, and identity theft. He got 4 years in prison, 5 years of probation, and was ordered to pay $250,000 in restitution. I was present at both sentencing hearings. The courtroom was formal and cold, with wooden benches and fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly ill. When Judge Martinez read Nicole's sentence, she collapsed. Actual, genuine collapse. Her legs gave out and she crumpled to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Her lawyer and a bailiff had to help her to her feet. Her parents, who'd been sitting in the front row throughout the proceedings, looked absolutely devastated. Her mother was weeping silently. Her father had his arm around her, his face gray and aged. Nicole's mother's eyes met mine across the courtroom as they led Nicole away. There was so much pain in that look, so much confusion and grief. She mouthed something to me. I think it was, "I'm sorry," before looking away. That moment stuck with me. Nicole's parents had done nothing wrong. They were good people who'd raised what they thought was a good daughter, and now they were watching her be taken to prison. They'd lost their savings posting her bail, and now they'd lost her anyway. I felt a complicated swirl of emotions. Not satisfaction, not joy, but not quite pity either. Just a profound sadness at how much damage two people's greed and selfishness had caused. Marcus's sentencing was 2 days later. He showed no emotion at all. He stood ramrod straight in his orange jail jumpsuit. He'd been in custody the entire time, unable to make bail, as Judge Martinez read his sentence. 4 years in prison, 5 years probation, $250,000 in restitution. His face remained a mask of carefully controlled anger. His jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping. When the judge asked if he had anything to say, his lawyer wisely advised him to remain silent. But as the bailiffs moved to escort him out, he turned and looked directly at me. The hatred in that look was pure and undiluted. If looks could kill, I would have dropped dead in that courtroom. I held his gaze steadily until he was led away. I refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing me flinch or look away. He'd tried to destroy me. He'd failed. That was the only truth that mattered. It was over. Finally, completely over. The legal proceedings, the uncertainty, the constant stress of waiting for the next development, all of it was done. They were going to prison, and I could finally start to move forward. But the aftermath was complicated. The restitution would take years to collect if I ever saw all of it. People leaving prison rarely have the resources to pay back hundreds of thousands of dollars. Patricia had been realistic about that from the beginning. You might get 20 or 30% of it eventually, she'd said. But you should consider the restitution order a moral victory more than a financial windfall. Still, Patricia had moved quickly to freeze assets after the arrests. We'd recovered about $120,000 immediately from the Cascade Marketing Solutions account and from Nicole's personal accounts. The BMW was seized and sold. Her designer handbags were liquidated. Marcus's expensive electronics and furniture were sold off. All of it went toward restitution. The rest would supposedly come in monthly payments as part of their probation agreements, $500 a month from each of them for the next several years. I wasn't holding my breath that I'd actually see all of it, but at least the legal system was trying. Lighthouse Digital survived. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when I wasn't sure we'd make it. The scandal had tainted us. Some potential clients chose other agencies because they didn't want to be associated with that company that was all over the news for fraud. It hurt every time, even though I knew intellectually that we'd been the victims. But slowly, we rebuilt our reputation. We did excellent work for the clients who stayed with us. We were radically transparent about what had happened and what we'd done to prevent it from ever happening again. Word got around that we were honest, reliable, and resilient. New clients started coming in. I promoted Maya to creative director 6 months after Nicole's arrest. She was nervous about stepping into the role. It felt like she was benefiting from a tragedy, and she struggled with that guilt. But she was incredibly talented, even more so than Nicole in some ways. She had Nicole's creative instincts, but with more empathy, more emotional intelligence. She understood that creativity should serve the client, not just the ego of the creator. Under her leadership, our creative work actually improved. We won awards. We landed bigger clients. Our revenue grew. A year after the arrests, Lighthouse Digital was doing better than ever. We had 23 employees instead of 15. We'd moved to a larger office space in a better location. We were profitable, growing, and thriving. We'd not just survived the scandal, we'd emerged stronger. But the personal healing took longer. Much longer. For months after everything happened, I couldn't trust anyone. I'd meet someone new and immediately start looking for signs they were lying, scheming, planning to hurt me. Every friendly gesture felt like it might be manipulation. Every offer of help seemed like it might have ulterior motives. Dr. Chen helped me work through it. This is normal, she'd assure me in our weekly sessions. You experienced a profound betrayal from the two people you trusted most. Penvar, of course you're hypervigilant now. Your brain is trying to protect you from being hurt again. But eventually, you'll need to learn to trust again. Not everyone is Nicole and Marcus. Most people are basically decent. How do I know who's decent and who's not? I'd ask, frustrated. You don't. Not for certain. That's what trust is. It's accepting the risk of being hurt because the alternative is being alone forever. You take it slow. You pay attention to actions over words. You trust your instincts. But you do have to be willing to take the risk eventually. I threw myself into work, into therapy, into rebuilding. I didn't date. I didn't even consider it. The thought of being vulnerable with someone, of trusting them with my heart, made me feel panicky and nauseous. I had a few casual coffee meetups with men from dating apps, but they never went anywhere. I'd sit across from these perfectly nice, interesting men and feel nothing but suspicion. When they'd text me after, asking for a second date, I'd make excuses. I'm too busy with work. I'm not ready. The timing isn't right. Dr. Chen called me on it. You're hiding, she said during one session. You're using work as a shield. That's understandable, but it's not sustainable. Eventually, you're going to have to let someone in. What if I let them in and they hurt me? I asked, my voice small. Then you'll survive it, she said simply. Just like you survived this. You're stronger than you think, Victoria. You rebuilt your business from the edge of bankruptcy. You put 2 criminals in prison. You protected your employees. You did all of that while dealing with profound personal betrayal. If someone hurts you again, and I'm not saying they will, but if they do, you'll handle it, because that's what you do. It took me almost a year to really believe her. I met Ryan at a business networking event in December, about 10 months after everything had imploded. I almost hadn't gone. I was tired. It had been a long week, and the last thing I wanted to do was make small talk with strangers. But Maya had convinced me that it would be good for business, good for my visibility in the community, good for rebuilding Lighthouse Digital's reputation. So I went, wearing a professional dress and a smile that felt only slightly forced, armed with business cards and rehearsed elevator pitches. Ryan owned a small coffee roasting company called Cascadia Coffee, a name that made me flinch slightly when I heard it, though his company had nothing to do with the fake Cascade Marketing Solutions that had been my downfall. He was looking for help with his marketing strategy. His coffee was excellent, locally sourced, environmentally sustainable, but he had almost no social media presence and no coherent brand identity. We talked business for an hour, standing by the bar in the hotel conference room where the event was being held. He was smart, thoughtful, asked good questions. He had this way of really listening when you spoke, nodding at the right moments, following up with relevant questions that showed he was processing what you said rather than just waiting for his turn to talk. And then somehow the conversation turned personal. I'm not even sure how it happened. One minute we were discussing Instagram algorithms, and the next I was telling him in very general terms about what had happened with Nicole and Marcus. I expected him to make an excuse and back away slowly. Who wants to get involved with someone who comes with that much baggage, that much drama, that much trauma? Instead, he just looked at me thoughtfully for a long moment, then said, "That must have been incredibly painful. I'm sorry that happened to you." He paused, then added, "But the fact that you survived it, rebuilt your company, and are standing here now, smiling and making jokes about marketing metrics, that's remarkable. You're remarkable." Something in my chest loosened slightly. Not fully, not completely, but just enough that I could take a deeper breath than I'd been able to in months. "Would you want to get coffee sometime?" he asked. "And before you worry, yes, I'm asking you out, but also genuinely no pressure. If you just want to talk business, we can just talk business." I hesitated. Every instinct I developed over the past year screamed at me to say no, to protect myself, to keep my walls up high and strong. But Dr. Chen's voice echoed in my head. "Eventually, you're going to have to let someone in." "Okay," I heard myself say. "Coffee. Just coffee." "Just coffee," he agreed, smiling. We started seeing each other, slowly, carefully. I was hypervigilant at first, analyzing everything he said and did, looking for red flags, waiting for the other shoe to drop. He was patient with me in a way that felt genuine rather than calculated. On our third date, I apologized for being weird and suspicious. He just shrugged. "You're not weird. You're cautious. That makes sense given what you went through. I'm not in a hurry. We can go as slow as you need." He meant it. He never pushed, never pressured. When I canceled plans at the last minute because I was having a panic attack, he just said, "No problem. Let me know when you're feeling better." When I asked invasive questions about his finances and his past relationships, he answered honestly without getting defensive. He left his phone face up on tables. He introduced me to his friends and family early on, rather than keeping me separate from his life. When he said he was going somewhere, he actually went there. When he said he was working late, I could call his office and he'd actually be there. These small consistencies, these tiny demonstrations of honesty, slowly built trust. 6 months into dating, he asked me to move in with him. I panicked. "That's too fast," I said immediately. "I'm not ready for that." "Okay," he said simply. "No pressure. The offer stands whenever you are ready." 3 months after that, I was ready. Moving in together felt like a huge leap of faith, like jumping off a cliff and hoping someone would catch me. But Ryan had proven himself over and over. He'd earned my trust through consistent action, through patience, through respect. I still had bad days. Days when old memories would surface and I'd spiral into anxiety and suspicion. Days when I'd check his phone when he was in the shower, hating myself even as I did it, but unable to stop. He caught me once, and instead of getting angry, he just sat me down and said, "I understand why you did that, but it's not healthy for either of us. If you need reassurance, ask me. I'll show you anything you want to see. But I need you to try to trust me." He was right, and I did try. Some days were easier than others. I still think about Nicole sometimes. According to the Oregon Department of Corrections website, which I checked more often than I probably should, she was released after serving 16 months of her 2-year sentence. Good behavior, apparently. She's living with her parents now in a small town outside of Eugene. Her LinkedIn profile, which I looked at once in a moment of weakness, shows she's working retail at a Target. No mention of her marketing career, no trace of Lighthouse Digital, no hint of the person she used to be. She sent me a letter once, about a year into her sentence. It arrived at my office in a plain envelope with a prison postmark. I stared at it for a long time before deciding to open it. The letter was 3 pages long, handwritten on lined notebook paper. It was full of apologies and explanations and justifications. She was sorry. She'd made terrible mistakes. Marcus had manipulated her. She'd been in a bad place emotionally. She never meant for things to go so far. She still loved me like a sister. Could I ever forgive her? I read it once, then put it through the office shredder. I didn't respond. Some betrayals are too profound to forgive. Some broken things can't be fixed. Dr. Chen and I had talked about this a lot in therapy. Forgiveness, she explained, didn't mean reconciliation. It didn't mean pretending it never happened or welcoming toxic people back into your life. It meant letting go of the anger so it didn't poison you. I'd let go of the anger, mostly. I didn't wish harm on Nicole. I didn't take pleasure in her suffering. I just didn't want her in my life anymore. The person I'd been friends with had never really existed. She'd been a performance, a mask worn by someone I didn't actually know. Marcus is still in prison. He has another 1.5 years before his earliest release date. I haven't heard from him since his sentencing, and I hope I never do. I don't check on him the way I occasionally check on Nicole. I don't think about him if I can help it. He's a ghost from a past life, and I want him to stay that way. The restitution payments come sporadically. Some months I get the full $1,000, some months I get nothing. It doesn't really matter anymore. The money they stole hurt us, but we recovered. Lighthouse Digital is thriving. We're profitable. The missing money is more of an abstract loss now than a concrete wound. What hurt more than the money was the trust they destroyed, the innocence they stole. Before all this, I believed in people. I believed that if you were good to someone, if you were loyal and honest and supportive, they'd be good to you in return. I believed that love and friendship meant something. I'm more cynical now, more guarded. I don't trust as easily or as completely. Part of me hates that they changed me in that way, that they took something light and hopeful and made it heavy and suspicious. But Dr. Chen frames it differently. You're not more cynical, she says. You're wiser. You've learned that trust needs to be earned, not freely given. You've learned that actions matter more than words. You've learned to set boundaries and protect yourself. Those aren't bad things, Victoria. Those are survival skills. Maybe she's right. I don't know yet. I'm still figuring it out. It's been 2 years now since that Tuesday morning when I came to the office early and discovered the fraud. 2 years since my world imploded. 2 years of rebuilding, healing, growing, changing. Lighthouse Digital is now a $1 million company again, bigger and better than before. We have 30 employees. We've won industry awards. We're known for our ethical practices and our transparency. The scandal that nearly destroyed us has become a weird sort of calling card. The company that survived internal fraud and came back stronger. Some clients specifically seek us out because of that story, because it demonstrates resilience and integrity. I'm in a healthy relationship with someone who respects me and treats me well. Ryan proposed last month. I said yes, though we're planning a long engagement. I'm not in any hurry to plan a wedding. Maybe someday. Right now, I'm just enjoying being with someone who makes me feel safe. I have a good therapist who keeps me grounded. I have loyal employees who believed in me when everything was falling apart. I have a sister who's still my champion and my friend. I have a life I've rebuilt from the ruins of betrayal. Sometimes people ask me if I regret turning Nicole and Marcus into the police. If I wish I'd handled it differently, maybe sued them civilly instead of pursuing criminal charges. If I feel guilty about the fact that they both went to prison because of my actions. The answer is always no. I don't regret it. I didn't send them to prison. Their choices sent them to prison. I just made sure they faced consequences for those choices. They didn't betray me once in a moment of weakness. They betrayed me systematically, repeatedly, deliberately, over months. They planned it. They executed it. They would have destroyed everything I'd built if I hadn't caught them. Nicole had full access to our accounts, full authority to drain them completely. If I'd discovered the fraud even a week later, Lighthouse Digital would have been bankrupt. 30 people would have lost their jobs. Dozens of small business owners would have lost their marketing campaigns and the money they'd paid us. I did what I had to do. I protected myself, my employees, my clients, and my company. I made sure that 2 people who'd committed fraud faced justice. There's nothing to feel guilty about in that. If anything, I'm proud of myself. I'm proud that I didn't crumble. I'm proud that when they thought I'd cry and break and give up, I came back fighting. I'm proud of the company I've rebuilt and the person I've become. I'm not the same Victoria who walked into the office that Tuesday morning 2 years ago. That Victoria was more naive, more trusting, maybe softer around the edges. She believed the best in people sometimes to her own detriment. This Victoria is harder, sharper, wiser. She trusts carefully and loves cautiously. She checks the numbers herself instead of assuming others are honest. She builds systems with checks and balances. She protects herself and the people who depend on her. I'm not sure which version of me is better. Maybe neither. Maybe they're just different and different is okay. What I do know is this. I survived. I rebuilt. I'm thriving now in ways I couldn't have imagined during those dark early days when everything was falling apart. And that, I've learned, is the real victory. Not revenge, not punishment, not even justice. Though all of those mattered too. The real victory is that I'm still here, still standing, still building, still growing. They tried to destroy me, and they failed. I'm still here. Lighthouse Digital is still here. We're stronger than we've ever been. That's the story I tell myself on hard days. That's the truth I hold on to when the old fears and suspicions start creeping in. They tried to break me, and I refuse to be broken. If you're reading this and going through something similar, if someone you trusted has betrayed you, if your world has been shattered by deception, please know this. You are stronger than you think. The pain you're feeling right now is real and valid, but it won't last forever. You will survive this. You'll rebuild. And on the other side, you might find that you've built something even better than what you lost. Trust your instincts. That uncomfortable feeling in your gut when something doesn't add up. That's your subconscious picking up on patterns your conscious mind hasn't processed yet. Don't ignore it like I did for so long. Don't talk yourself out of your own intuition. The signs are almost always there if we're willing to see them. But also know that surviving betrayal doesn't mean you have to stop trusting everyone forever. It means you learn to trust more carefully. You learn the difference between people who've earned your trust through consistent action and people who just say the right words. You learn to build relationships slowly, to verify before you trust, to protect yourself without closing yourself off completely. It's a balance. Some days I get it right, some days I don't. But I'm trying, and that's enough. Thank you for reading my story. It helps to share it, to know that I'm not alone in experiencing this kind of betrayal. If this resonated with you, or if you've been through something similar, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. We're all in this together, figuring out how to trust again after betrayal, how to rebuild after destruction, how to love again after loss. Stay strong, everyone. Document everything, trust your instincts, and know that you're more resilient than you realize. The best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's building a life so good, so successful, so fulfilling that the people who tried to destroy you become irrelevant. And if those people happen to face legal consequences for their actions, well, that's not revenge. That's just justice. And justice, as it turns out, feels pretty good. I'm signing off now. Lighthouse Digital has a big client presentation tomorrow, and I need to review the materials one more time. Ryan is making dinner. He's testing a new coffee rubbed steak recipe he wants to serve at his company's next tasting event. My life is full of small, normal, beautiful things now. 2 years ago, I couldn't have imagined that. 2 years ago, I was sitting in a motel room at 3 a.m., my world in pieces, wondering how I'd survive. But I did survive. More than that, I thrived. And if I can do it, so can you. Take care of yourselves out there. Trust carefully. Love bravely. And never, ever ignore your instincts. They're usually right.